Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Revelations with Erin Pizzey. On this show, we will be exploring the issues faced by men and boys everywhere. We will be sharing our perspectives and your own. Your host, Erin Pizzey, was born in 1939 in China while her father was stationed there as a member of the British Foreign Office. In 1971, Erin opened the first ever domestic violence refuge for battered women and children in Chiswick, England. What she found, however, was that many of the women coming into her shelter were as violent as the men they were fleeing. Over the years, she also tried to create resources and safe spaces for men as well as women, but frequently met with indifference and hostility to men suffering. Nevertheless, it's a passion she continues to hold to this day for men, for women, and especially for children.
For so many years, feminists have been able to demonize men under their artificial argument called patriarchy. Hi, I'm Erin Pizzey, and through working with battered women in my refuges, I saw for myself how family violence is passed on from one generation to the next. Quite simply, violent behavior experienced in childhood is often carried forward into adult relationships. Family violence is not a gender issue, and never was. It's a generational issue. To my amazement, nobody ever wanted to hear why violent people treat each other the way they do. Instead, feminists have had people believe that men are responsible for all the violence in our society. There is sufficient evidence that both men and women can be equally violent in their personal relationships, but for many years, men and boys have been held to ransom and have been made to live in the knowledge that they are dispensable and shamed. There is an enormous job ahead of us, but my hope is that the 21st century will see men and women standing shoulder to shoulder and working together to actively take on the feminists and to show everyone that domestic violence is not and never has been a gender issue.
The truth is that men and boys are not privileged in our society, but are often marginalised, disadvantaged and ignored. We will be inviting you to call in and discuss your views and your experiences. Anyone of any age, sex, sexual orientation or religious background is invited to call in and talk. We may not get to everyone, but we will do our best within the show's allotted time. If you do wish to call in to share your own experiences, you will probably want to keep things on a first-name basis. You may wish to use a pseudonym for yourself or family members so that there's no concern about privacy. Welcome to Revelations with Erin Pizzey and her co-host, Dean Esme. The truth is often painful to hear, but in truth there is hope, and we hope you will stick around to hear it.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this week's special episode of Revelations with Erin Pizzey. As our regular listeners know, under normal circumstances, we run every 2 weeks, every other Saturday, not every week, but September has been a special month, and we've been doing a show a week all through September. Probably back in October, we will be resuming our normal bi-weekly schedule. Say hello to everybody, Erin.
Hello, everybody.
Just so you know, next week I will not be here. At least I won't be co-hosting the show. Next week at this time, I may or may not be able to make it. But what will be happening is there will be we'll be having Andy Thomas come on and act as the co-host as I work on coordinating some things that are going on in Toronto from here. And what we may be doing is also setting up a special live feed from Toronto. In Toronto next Saturday the 28th, There's going to be a rally in support of men and boys in crisis at Queen's Park in Toronto, which will be happening the day after a speech given by Professor Miles Groth, or is it Groth? Anyway, Professor Miles Groth, he will be giving a speech for the Canadian Association for Equality at the University of Toronto, and we're going to have people on the ground to cover that. And then we're going to have people on the ground to cover the rally for Men and Boys in Crisis the very next morning, same time as this radio show. And we're going to see, in addition to whoever we have as a guest next week, which is probably Mike Buchanan of the Justice for Men and Boys Party there in the UK, we're going to attempt to set up a live feed so that we can call people and or we can have people there at the event call and give reports on the ground as to what's going on there. It's going to be a very exciting week for the men's human rights movement, possibly a pivotal week. We do expect counter-protests from people who give the usual crap about how we're misogynists and want to put women back in the kitchen and, well, the usual feminist rants. It's just hate-mongering nonsense. I'm sure you remember having similar experiences from feminists yourself, Erin.
I definitely do, yes, absolutely. As far as I was concerned, I just thought most of them were crazies. Yeah. I mean, because with the behavior and the language, it's something it's not pleasant to have to be part of it, and do be careful for all of those of you that are out there.
Speaking of those who are out there, our special guest this week is Attila Vinczer. Attila was born in Europe, communist Europe, if I'm not mistaken. He is now a Canadian citizen. He is associated with the Canadian Maltese Charity and also Canada Court Watch. And Attila, I've got to know this man online over the last year, and I've gotten to know him even better over the last couple of weeks. And he's had quite a story and quite an experience as a Canadian citizen going through hell as a father, as a man who cares about his own human rights. He has also arranged and helped us to arrange this rally at Queen's Park near the University of Toronto next Saturday. He's been pivotal in making that happen, and I have him on the line right now. Say hello, if you would, please, Attila.
Hello, everyone. At first, I just want to express that I'm very humbled to be speaking on a radio show with Erin Pizzey. I have heard a lot about you, and I have the utmost respect for what you have done in a lifetime of advocacy for human rights. And moving right along, my family moved to Canada in 1973. My father, in fact, was the master jeweler to the presidency, that is President Tito. And
that was in communist Yugoslavia, was it? No, I'm sorry. Yeah, Yugoslavia?
That's correct. That's right. And so he was tipped off that on his passing, there would be incredible distress, even war in Yugoslavia, as the country would inevitably fall apart and be at war. And in fact, it happened some decades later, but that is pretty much what ended up happening, as we all very well know. And so my father decided to uproot a very comfortable life in Yugoslavia to come to Canada, and he could have emigrated to Germany or Austria or any other place in the world for that matter, but he chose Canada because he felt it was the better choice of them all, as a place where he could raise his children, who would then have an opportunity to live in peace and with certain dignities and human rights.
Well, I got to tell you, Attila, if I can interrupt for just a second. Speaking as an American, you know, we talk a lot, we brag a lot about how we're the land of the free and the home of the brave. But the fact of the matter is, I have always grown up admiring Canada and thinking of Canada. Yes, we Americans joke at Canadians sometimes, and Canadians usually take it in good spirit. But I've always thought of Canada as a beacon of freedom and free expression and free association and equal rights for all. I've always thought it's an inspiring country for the rest of the world. That's how I used to think of it anyway.
Well, Dean, sadly, as it has come to be known to my father, and who is now 76 years old, that in fact, while on the outside we tell the world how free and open and everything else that we are that's good about Canada, we have some serious problems, which is what led me to want to and need to have an event properly and adequately called Men and Boys in Crisis, because that is what is going on. And we can debate to length as to how we have ended up here. The fact of the matter is that in Canada, we have got serious problems. And we need to bring these matters forward, not just in Canada, but globally. Because people they are in disbelief when I tell them, for example, earlier this year, my 12-year-old son was charged and arrested, and the arresting officer threatened to put him in jail if he did not capitulate to sign a particular document at the police station after I pleaded vehemently that, please use your discretionary power. I said, basically, you are hurting my 12-year-old son as a way.
What has he done, Derek? Can you tell us what he's done?
I'll tell you what he's done. And I'm not going to say that what he did was 100% proper.
No,
he's a 12-year-old boy, and what the boys have done at school is when they go to the toilet, they kind of rattle the cage, if you will, on each other. In this particular case, it happened to be a stall door that was had not had a working lock for years, apparently. And my son had kicked the door with no intent anything major to happen. A grade 8 student then coerced him to kick it harder and more, and again, which he did. The boy inside may have let the door go, and it swung open. It tapped the child on the head. There was no bruising, no marks, nothing at all. But as a means of, and I've found this out through my investigations, the school was more interested in avoiding their personal liability, its school liability, than to deal with the matter at a level that was appropriate. Police were called. They wanted him to do community service, which I reluctantly, but I did agree to it as a better option than going through the courts. And I thought it would be a good opportunity for my son to learn that if you are going to violate the criminal code, this is the sort of thing that can happen to you. Well, I ended up going on the Charles Adler show in full disguise, and I spoke about matters that happened at his previous school where my
Sorry, did you just say the Charles Adler show?
That's correct.
Yes, that's a Canadian. What network is that on?
That is on Sun Media. It's national television. Charles Adler is a very respected journalist doing some fantastic work, talking about things that are...
So you were discussing your son's arrest, were you?
I'm sorry?
You were discussing your son's arrest on this national show.
That's correct.
Right.
Actually, no, not true. On that national show, I spoke about another incident about 4 years earlier where another principal had locked my children up, who were 6 and 8 years old at the time, in the principal's office, based on a vindictive ex-wife making a false allegation to the Children's Aid Society, who ordered the school principal to hold my kids. The principal foolishly locked my children up, who were 6 and 8 years old at the time, in his office under lock and key, to the point where they couldn't get out to go to the washroom. They couldn't get a drink of water. My youngest ended up urinating and defecating in his pants because he was so frightened. I went to the local police station seeking help. They basically ignored it. And it was just a tragic situation that was put on the Canada Court Watch Vimeo website. Charles Adler saw the video, and he did an interview about it where I spoke for about 12 minutes discussing this particular issue.
Attila, I mean, you're talking about something. Can I just take you back to ask you? You're talking about Canada, and Canada, as most of us had seen, certainly in the 70s. Is this what has happened now that has brought this situation to where you have been persecuted, and so have your children, as far as I can see? Did this all start, as I understand it, with Trudeau creating huge sums of money which were given to the emerging feminist movement? Am I right in thinking that behind all this that I saw 10 years ago when I travelled across Canada talking to men's groups, I saw this appalling situation which even 10 years ago I had been saying Canada is one of the most dangerous countries in the world for heterosexual white males.
Erin, you are absolutely right. And in fact, to dovetail into the Trudeau mechanism of funding feminists, in addition to that, and I'm sure you may recall and the name just escapes me for a moment, but nonetheless, it was during the time of Marion Boyd, the NDP Bob Rae era, where it was the Ralph Hadley inquiry. It was a murder-suicide, and I'm not going to get into that deep story right now, but nonetheless, the feminists, the women's shelter industry, needed a reason for funding. So that they utilized that as an opportunity to say, look, men are killing mothers and women. They are hurting women. We need protection. And that is what brought in the zero tolerance domestic violence protocol under the hands of a non-lawyer, Marion Boyd, whom I've also understood to be a radical feminist. That is what I've heard. That is what people have told me. And she's also the individual who provided Carla Homolka with a plea bargain that enabled her freedom ahead of Paul Bernardo, and both of them should be rotting in jail. But instead, because she's a woman, it appears, she was allowed to have children who she brought into this world in Quebec. The Children's Aid Society people didn't bother removing a child from her who's a killer. And she's now living in some other country with 3 children, raising them, when she's one of the most heinous, notorious murdering killers in Canada. But going back to the element that you drew my attention to, Erin, indeed, Canada has become a very, very inhospitable place for men and boys. And the reason I brought to light the couple of incidents that I've experienced personally with my own boys, actually with my eldest son, who for whatever reason they've made him the target, it is horrendous.
Now, wait a minute. You say your 12-year-old boy, and just to keep us on track, your son's faced this severe legal repercussion for what amounts to a minor schoolyard scuffle. A school bathroom scuffle. Nobody actually hurt, just boys being stupid. I mean, what was the outcome of that? Or has that been resolved?
It has been resolved. It was not a simple task, and I will tell you, if I did not have the knowledge and wisdom that I have, it would have cost me in the tens of thousands of dollars to clear this problem up. My son ended up being arrested, charged. He was then forced to get his mugshot taken, palm print, fingerprint. I will tell you, the officer that did that piece of the job in Richmond Hill, he told me, he says, I am embarrassed. I should not be doing this today. And I have yet to actually meet with him because he wants to tell me some of the things that he has seen in the policing area of things that is just a big problem. The way he put it, he pointed to his head and he says, people just don't use anything inside of this anymore. And the thing is, and I just wanted to tie this into that Charles Adler show, it wasn't 2 days after I went on national television, that they took this action and had my son charged and arrested. I later found out that a female staff sergeant made the order without justification to have my son arrested. So these are the kinds of very deep-rooted politics that flows in the judicial system in Canada. And where does it come from? It comes from the propaganda that is disseminated throughout, on television, on radio, in movies, in social media. And there's this stigma that has been created that men rape women, they hurt children, they are all potential pedophiles, they're animals, they're beasts, and they need to be caged.
Yeah, you know, I cringed a little there when Erin went ahead and added the word white heterosexual males, because I'm sitting there thinking, boy, I have some black friends who can tell you some stories. So I don't know that it's necessarily a racial issue. But
all right. Wait a minute. I can explain that, because in England, in the quota system, where jobs are concerned, at the bottom, the last people to get jobs are white heterosexual males. Ethnic groups become ahead of that.
Sure.
It is the heterosexual male, and I don't think that's to do with racism. It's to do, if you want to look at it that way, then you can say there's a kind of subtle reclassification of men.
Yeah, in general. I know that in the United States, I know so many black men who've been through this same kind of, I'll just call it bullshit. But in any case, I didn't want anybody to think this is a show about white people only. I just wanted to make that clear.
Come on, Dean. I didn't mean that. And you know
I know you didn't. I want to make sure our audience knows it too.
We're not stupid, Dean.
Fair enough, Erin. Fair enough. Go on, Attila.
So just reflect on that. I understand what Erin is saying, and I also understand Dean has to be very careful that we're not attacked, because that really is another element of our plight, is that people are just looking for that catch me moment where they could say, look, see, there you go. And what I would like to say is that it's men and boys, and there are some variances in certain areas, but men and boys are the people who are under attack, and it includes everybody. Every religion, every race, every sexual orientation. It affects every male.
I'm interested, Attila. Do you have the same problem we have in that, in a sense, when the Labour government were in, Harriet Harman, who was then a minister and a minister for women, had said, and written in a document, that the new future for the family would be women and children, because men weren't necessarily harmonious to matrimonial life. Does Canada have the same attitude towards the family needing to disenfranchise men?
Yes, I have noticed that. I've certainly picked up on it. My antennas came attuned to this rather quickly, and I'm not entirely sure, what the real reason for this is, but it is something that is not sustainable. We cannot treat the other half of the population in a manner that makes them appear to be a disposable piece of junk that we just will use for basic needs, and otherwise they are just useless. And that is what I am seeing, that men and boys are no longer considered to be worthy.
Human.
It may not be stated so specifically and openly that way, but that is what the propaganda is doing. That is why boys are having problems in school. It is prevalent everywhere.
Boys are struggling in school. They're dropping out of school. They're not going to university. Or if they do go to university, they're dropping out of university. If they graduate from university, they're less able to get a job. It's bad across the board. If they're accused of anything, they're guilty until proven innocent just about, especially if a woman accuses them. Am I exaggerating?
You're not exaggerating. I'm going to share something with you, and I have this on audio tape, so if she wishes to confront me about it, so be it. I had a meeting with the school principal. Her name is Carol Taggio, and I discussed this very topic, that I'm noticing my boys are struggling in school. not because they're not intelligent, but because they are unable to function within an environment that appears to be inhospitable for their way of thinking. And she agreed with me, and in fact, she's told me, we are aware that there is such a problem, it is a crisis. However, when I raised that issue more openly amongst other people, the trustees, etc., that officiate over the school environment, she denied it. And it is time that we speak the truth. And personally, my position is, what I wish to bring forward here today and in the future is the unabated truth. I don't care who it may offend. If it's the truth, I will speak about it. And sadly, just because I am speaking the truth, I have often been labeled like other people who bring such information forward as a misogynist, as a woman hater, and then the attacks of, well, you need to, find a woman to go to bed with, et cetera, et cetera.
You're just bitter. You're just, can't get over it. But you just sort of told a story, and I want to close the loop on this one, too. You said this incident a few years ago where your children were terrorized and locked up in the principal's office for hours, which is a horrible thing, due to what you called false allegations. You were able to prove those were false allegations, were you not?
Absolutely. And in fact, you should have seen it. I had I counted 7 police cruisers that came to my house to try to intimidate me on that particular night in December 1st, 2008. December the 4th, 2008. Unbelievable. Now, I am a single dad with 2 boys. Why on earth do you need to send 14 police officers to my house to deal with anything?
Can I ask you something? I think when I was in Canada, I was there for quite a long time because I had to go right across the country and back. One of the things I felt that there was a huge area of paranoia across Canada about and it was quite extraordinary to talk to groups of men who no longer had passports. They didn't have cars. They were in and out of jail because they couldn't get jobs because they didn't have cars. And even at one small incident, which I've talked about, I was standing in a lift in the Senate, going to Anne Couls's office, and the door opened, and the man standing there looked at me, and he wouldn't come in the lift. I was the only person. And I said to Anne, what on earth was that about? And she said, well, men won't get into lifts anymore with lone women because they can't trust them not to say that they have made a pass at them. And it was a very shattering, actually. And I had many...
Erin, it is absolutely shocking, and I'm going to speak to you from the other set of eyes, the other perspective, and I'll be the guy that was thinking about getting on that elevator. I will tell you, I am very, very distressed if I do set foot in an elevator with women on the elevator, because all the women have to do is to say that I sexually assaulted her. Yeah. Her word and her word alone is enough to have me charged and convicted.
And then you're a sex offender.
The other thing I wanted to ask you, Attila, is as far as I could see, I was told by people who had experiences with the shelters that you have in Canada that if a woman came into a shelter, whether she'd been attacked or not, and she wanted to hurry the divorce, she was advised to say that her husband had beaten her up and that she was in fear of him. And if that didn't work fast enough, it was called the silver bullet. She would then accuse him of molesting the children, and then, of course, she would keep everything and he would never see his kids again.
Erin, that is exactly what happens. Canada Court Watch has interviewed dozens and dozens of women who have come forward who were themselves abused in the shelters that they had gone to. In fact, I have it on audio tape. A woman actually called me from a women's shelter in Toronto and asking me for help. She said, I am violating a court order. I'm not going to allow the kids to go near a dad. And she had absolutely no reason or cause. And she said, I've been told to violate the court order by the women's shelter staff. And I've been told that the police will not dare come inside the women's shelter to look for me. This is the sort of thing that's going on. Some of the women that have come forward are telling me that
but of course you can't get it publicized, because there was a very good reporter when I was there. I was saying that the shelters were used as bunkers for the feminist women to politicize very, very fragile women and their children, because no men could work in those refuges. So the children have no models. And boys over a certain age aren't allowed into the shelters.
That's right. If the boys up to the age of 14 are allowed to be with the mother at the shelter, but if they are 14 and above, the mother can't go to the shelter with her 14-year-old son. And that, to me, is just ridiculous. And I know, Erin, you would never, ever put such a condition.
No, we had boys up to the age of 18 and 19. It's their family. So their family came in because they had all suffered in the hands of an abuser. And the same, it happened when families came in because the mother was the abuser. The most important thing is the family unit. And I think one of the things that you're talking about, I do still think of all the countries I've been to, and I've been to most of them, the Western countries, Canada is by far the worst, and they should stand ashamed of themselves. But I do feel that it is now global, and the countries are coming forward, people who care are coming forward. First and foremost, I don't know about you, but I would point my finger at our family courts here in London. They are corrupt top to bottom.
Listen, I'm going to share this bit of information now that you've mentioned family court. I hired a lawyer, and I have all this documented, so if anybody wishes to attack me on it, be my guest. I hired a lawyer, Kevin Dunsmuir, who very sadly has passed away this year at around Easter, died in a house fire. Actually, his wife and two children died as well. And to that, I'm very, very sympathetically sorry. And I feel very badly because at the end of the day, he is still a human being.
Yes.
But let me share this with you. This man had failed intentionally to put irrefutable hard evidence into court when a motion was brought forward to deal with a matter of custody. And I was dumbfounded that this lawyer would not have put this vital information into the motion. And when I questioned him on it, he actually admitted to me that he said that they made a mistake. When I told him that I tape recorded him, he paused for a half a minute. He says, "You know, Attila," and he was trying to coerce about $27,000 out of me. He says, "You know, Attila, you owe me nothing. You have the freedom to use my office, my staff, commission affidavits, whatever you need." And it was only then that things actually turned around for me. I took on my own case. I went back into court, and this Kevin Dunsmuir had me agree to a court order on consent, which is difficult to overturn. That I would pay my ex-wife $500 more per month than what my gross income was. That sets the stage for having your driver's license revoked, passport revoked. It also sets the stage of being put in prison. And just so we understand, debtor's prison is only open to men. Debtor's prison has been outlawed in every other aspect of civilization, except for when it comes to men in paying child support. And consequently, a lot of these men will commit suicide because they just have nothing left to live on.
And your attorney was prepared to just go ahead and let that happen to you. And let me tell you, although we are talking a lot about Canada today, I have met men from the United States who've had the same exact experience. Very recently, even people in my family being totally screwed over by an incompetent and or venal family law attorney who said he would help those men and then lets them get steamrolled. I've even known guys who've been picked up by law firms who claim they help represent men. They charge them more than they know they can afford, and then when they run out of money, they drop them as clients, or they let them go ahead and sign off on orders they know perfectly well their clients are incapable of paying and don't do a damn thing because it's all about
Can I just add something to that? Attila, I don't know if you've come across this, but it certainly happens in England. A solicitor in England is an officer of the court. So for many solicitors who actually go into court and are going want to put in evidence that they know will antagonize the other side, because the majority of we call them solicitors, we call them attorneys, the majority of our solicitors are female now, and largely radical, many of them are radical feminists. Many of our male solicitors are actually quite frightened of crossing all of the feminine representatives in the family court, because they know that there will be serious repercussions. Does that often happen in Canada?
Yes, we have similar fears. And in fact, when I mentioned to my lawyer that I'm working with Canada Court Watch, he said, "Oh, stay away from them if you ever want Children's Aid Society to write a positive letter for us."
Yeah.
So there is a huge amount of fear mongering, and in fact, I'm going to tell you exactly what my lawyer said to me.
Yeah.
I said, "Listen, I need to get custody of my kids, and I'm not going to get into the specifics. I'm not interested in doing that, but I needed to keep my children safe in a difficult situation." And I said, "Kevin, what is it going to take for me to get custody of these kids?" And he said to me, "If you can prove," and I'm quoting this, "if you can prove that your wife doesn't eat babies, and you have DNA evidence that she doesn't have a twin sister, then you might have a chance to get custody of your children." Imagine that.
Well, here, the solicitors say to the men, don't even try for it. Don't even
Right.
try for it. Because I've got 2 cases where women had murdered in the past. They still got custody.
But guess what? At the end of the day, the truth will persevere. Men need to understand that it's a long process.
Yeah.
There are ways to mitigate the situation, and I strongly recommend for people to get the book called The Book of 5 Rings by Musashi. It teaches you how to strategize and deal with conditions, whether you're up against a large body or a single body. There are ways to deal with this. The biggest thing is you have got to be prepared for a long, drawn-out situation. It is all doable. You need to learn the rules of the road, and remember, your lawyer works for you. You have hired them. You're the bus driver. You just hired them to be your navigator.
Have you got any way of creating a list of solicitors or lawyers in your case that you can trust, that men can trust? Because I think that's one of the most dreadful factors, because so many times, and I think Dean said, men find themselves with lawyers eagerly saying, we will help you, and then they find that they're completely trashed once their money's run out.
I have found, and I go back in law or the courtroom back in the days of my corporate days, where it is a lot more civility, believe it or not, in civil court, in the corporate world, than there is in family court. Family court is the worst.
Yeah.
And it is difficult to find, and I have found lawyers that you can trust, but it's very difficult because the need for greed, it seems to surpass anything and everything. It is a very, very sad situation, but we do have certain lawyers that can do a good job, and they do a good job, but they are very, very, very rare.
One of the things I'd like to see happen long term, it still hasn't happened because there's so much to do on men's and boys issues, it's overwhelming. One of the things I've been hoping to see happen one of these days is to start developing a list of family attorneys who can be trusted, because you are right, they are few and far between. I was talking to one recently, somebody who's close to me. He hired an attorney. He walked into the office saying, my ex has already agreed to everything. She's ready to just sign. The attorney wanted $5,000 anyway, and then after he ponied up the $5,000, remember, this is a case where they'd already agreed to everything, and he started strongly encouraging his ex to get a lawyer to, quote, help her through the process, unquote, which is just another way of saying this attorney wanted more money. and wanted to turn it into a fight, even though they'd already had an amicable agreement. You can't trust most attorneys. You cannot, and it's sad to say that, but you can't. And I don't know what to do about that except do exactly what Attila just said and realize, no, the attorney works for you. And
right.
you'll be making the calls, and you'll be calling the shots. You don't listen to your attorney listens to you. And you need to talk to other men who've gone through it so they can warn you what can happen, because they're out for you, son. And you need to know that. And that's just family court.
That's right. Family court.
Sorry, Attila. Just to say, our family courts, because it's London-based, but in certainly the big cities like Manchester and Liverpool, everybody knows everybody, whether they're barristers or whatever. They all know each other. They all know the judges, so it becomes extremely incestuous. And because it has been permeated and radicalized by the Willis movements, who in, I think, many parts of the world do all the training of the judges and various solicitors and barristers, the trouble is that it is already set against any man who puts a foot into a family court.
That's absolutely right, Erin. And in fact, a lot of the children's aid lawyers, they end up moving up the scale, and they become judges. Now, imagine going before a feminist, radical feminist, former CAS lawyer who is now a judge, making decisions about family matters. A judge who does not see an impact family as a norm. They see anything and everything. In fact, they make their money by shattering impact homes. The Children's Aid Society in Ontario is a $1.5 billion a year industry.
Yeah.
And if they don't bring children into their care, if they don't have open files, they get no funding. Their funding stays on
the quota systems.
Right. It's horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do a show just strictly on the Children's Aid Society, which is a horrendous group.
Oh, it's horrific. Your Children's Aid Society should be actually shut down and revolutionized and completely got rid of, because it is essentially operating in a political fashion against families.
Exactly. And I applaud that, Erin. I support that, because it's all interconnected. The Children's Aid Society, the social workers therein, most of which in Ontario are actually practicing social work in violation of the law that they are supposed to adhere to, and because they're not members of the college, they can go ahead and they're not held accountable. That they are immune to prosecution unless you can demonstrate that they were willfully negligent. And I've uncovered how to navigate, be it the Children's Aid Society, family court, even criminal court, in the realm of family matters, which touches upon domestic violence, rape, and sexual charges. It is a machine that once you get inside of it, it will grind you up and spit you out ragged can be, and it is no wonder that 8 men and 2 women will commit suicide each and every day in Canada.
I know.
As they are ravaged and devastated by the
system. Yeah, Attila, it is to me, it is actually shocking that you and I and Dean are talking this way, or even having to have this discussion.
I know you'd think we're talking about things going on in Yugoslavia under the dictator Tito, or in Russia under Stalin. I mean, you're talking about secret hearings, secret courts. Yeah. You're just talking about demanding the police demanding a signed confession from your son for God knows what. And Attila, you've had to prove your own innocence. The only thing that's astonishing about it is you have proven your own innocence. But that's what you have to do. How did you manage it?
Let me tell you how I managed that. I happen to know how the system works. I know what works. I know what doesn't. And I went into court. Well, first of all, let me just finish. and continue with the story. So my son gets arrested. He's charged. We get his fingerprints done. But even before that, I'm asking questions from the police officer. I want disclosure. Regina versus Stinchcombe is a very famous case law which guarantees or forces anybody that brings a charge against you, they have to give you every bit of information that exists in that matter. So I was pressing the officer to get me disclosure. He began to mislead me. A week after he charged my son, he shows up at my house. My 10-year-old boy, so my younger son, comes inside the house. He says, "Hey, Dad, there's a police officer outside. He says he's coming in the house." I said, "Ryan, please don't kid around like that today after what I've been through with Stephen." And I look out the window. There's a cruiser outside of my house. I walk to the door, and the officer motions to his ear that he can't hear me, which essentially what people will do is open the door, in essence insinuating consent that you can come in. So I slammed the door, locked it, and I phoned the police on him. This officer came there to intimidate me. He questioned illegally my 10-year-old son. He is absolutely not allowed to do that. I had another officer attend the house, and he brokered a conversation with this cop who was trying to make up 3 separate excuses of why he attended the home. And it went on from there. I ended up at the first appearance, and the typical thing that happens when you're criminally charged is they'll say, "Look, agree to taking some anger management courses, admit that you were at fault to some level, pay a $500 fine, do community service, and you're going to go home." Or, as most often men are arrested, they've already spent time in prison, so they're very eager to be free, because if they're not free, they can't pay the rent, can't pay the car payment, they're going to lose everything. And this is what they did with my own son. They wanted him to plea bargain. I said, "Not a chance. We're going to go to trial." I said, "Not only are we going to go to trial, I'm going to the media."
It sounds sorry, because we lost touch with you just then. Can you say that again?
Yes. So we are now at the first appearance in court.
Yes.
I immediately went to the Crown Attorney. I said, "Look, there's zero possibility of bringing a conviction. This is way over the top. He's 12 years old, never been in trouble with the law. He's well known in the community. He's a good kid. Withdraw the charge." She looks at me and says, "Nope, charge has been laid. We're moving forward." And that is when I went before the judge, and she tried to make me look bad, that I'm not cooperating. And I said, "Your Honor, let's stand the matter down, and I'll speak with Mr. Vinczer, a 12-year-old who effectively is the authority as to what he wants to do, not even me, even though I'm his custodial father." So we stood the matter down, had some discussions with the duty counsel, which is a court-appointed lawyer who is also working essentially for the Crown side, if you will, and she failed to protect my child's rights. I have all this very well documented, and I told her, I said, "Look, we're going to go to trial. I'm going to go to the press. I will subpoena the other 12-year-old kids. So you decide what you want to do. Either withdraw the charge or we go to trial." End the story. And some discussion was had. The Crown Attorney spoke with duty counsel, and they realized, you know what, better we let this thing go, and they decided to withdraw the charge. Interestingly enough, and I'll finish it off with this on that day in court, the judge said to me, "Mr. Vinczer, I can only wish that more fathers," actually that's not how she said it, "I can only wish that more parents were as connected with your children as you are. But it took this incredible struggle for me to clear my son's name."
And do you think that you think part of this was targeting you because of your past run-ins with the so-called Children's Aid Society and all the rest of that machinery?
I think it's a combination of that, and as I got full disclosure, I came to quickly understand. I see patterns very easily. It all gelled together perfectly. It was the school principal who decided for whatever reason to attack my son. She brought forward information to the police that was false. She coerced the mother of the child, who really wasn't hurt in any way, to take her child to the doctor. She made notes that were absolutely false. I had a board meeting with the school staff. She refused to admit that she lied, and consequently I filed a $22.2 million lawsuit against her, the vice principal, the superintendent of the school, and the school board.
You are someone not to mess with, Attila, and I'll tell you, we need more guys like you. One of the things I've often observed, and this is something Paul Elam has agreed with me on, several other people have agreed on, you know who the biggest problem is in the men's movement? It's not feminists, it's men. And by that I don't mean to shame men, but we're almost afraid anymore to speak up on our own behalf or to speak up for our fellow man. And if we don't learn to start doing that, nothing's going to get changed and nothing's going to get better. How do we get past this tendency to just help? Men need to stop accepting that they're just bitter losers if they get screwed over like this. They've got to stop accepting that.
Well, I think one of the first things that Canadian men can do is to join you, Attila, this weekend. And I know, Dean, you might not be able to get there, but if you can, it would be fantastic, because for the first time, Canada is going to look at men standing up instead of inertly letting what's happened, because it's been 40 years now, and there are huge positions of power that need to be toppled, largely by radical feminists.
We need to stop thinking it's a joke when somebody talks about how, that guy got screwed with alimony and child support, and he got screwed with on the card. Isn't that funny? No, it isn't. It's not funny at all. This is totalitarianism. This is persecution. And I'm using those words willingly. I don't care who thinks I sound hysterical. This is totalitarian persecution.
Yeah.
Am
I exaggerating, Attila? Do you think I am?
You're not exaggerating at all. And in fact, to be fair to men, and this includes me, we have been conditioned to be very, very afraid. We have been conditioned to be afraid of where we walk, where we look, how we may put, just as a completely innocent, maybe wherever we're at, to touch a 5-year-old girl, just as a human being and nothing more. Men have become fearful that if you say the wrong thing, if you look the wrong way, you are going to be screwed. When men find themselves in divorce court, it's like, oh my God, I better just do whatever they want me to do, because they will put me in jail. They will. I will never see my kids. I'm going to lose this. I'm going to lose that. The thing is this: I say the worst thing that a man can do is to be silent. There's already a fire in your house. There's no sense in you running out and hiding in the bushes. You better yell fire, because that is what is happening.
And your brother and your neighbor next to you, if he yells fire, don't laugh at him. Stop that. He needs your help.
Exactly. We are in a severe crisis. We are at a critical mass in terms of people, and usually men come forward after they've been destroyed, because there's nothing left. But I say we need to get to the root of the problem as quickly as possible. And that is how you're going to succeed in having some success, be it in family court, criminal court, etc. The worst thing we can do is to be silent.
Well, I think the first and foremost thing is that because all the studies show that domestic violence in the home between men and women are roughly equal, I think we should get rid of the entire concept, which actually was flawed from the beginning, about the patriarchy, being men who oppressed. Domestic violence isn't a gender issue. It's never been a gender issue. It's actually a family issue, and it's generational.
That's right.
Once we can get that on board and people understanding this, we stop the phony war between men and women, and we finally take to task the feminist movement that has funded its political ideology upon the backs of very fragile women who are trying to get into the refuges.
And it's not just domestic violence, although that's probably where it all started.
Yeah.
Even we had a terrific show that everybody should go on our archives and listen to with Philip W. Cook about women who commit sexual assault. We've got to get over this notion that women don't commit sexual assault, men do. Bollocks, it's nonsense. They're about as likely to be sexually aggressive and actually commit crimes, not to be charged for them often, but to actually commit these sexual crimes. Men are not perverts and pedophiles any more than women are, nor are they rapists any more than women are. And we've got to get past that nonsense, too. Those seem like the twin prongs that are used against every man to make him afraid, to make him ashamed, to make him think there's something wrong with him and his sex. And it's got to go. And we've got to start speaking up for each other.
Look, it has got to go. And something that is a big thing for me is false allegations.
Yes, I agree.
I was subject to it when I was divorcing, and I will tell you, I had surveillance on my house. I had hired private investigators, and I was documenting everything. My ex-wife conspired with other family members to have me put in prison. The conspiracy was that I sexually assaulted one of my children. And guess what? The only thing that kept me out of prison is the fact that I had everything on audio recording, the conspiracy, the day that the alleged event happened, which never happened, and the difference between me and the other men is I had the proof, whereas other men are just handcuffed and taken away.
You were already taping just under the thought that this might happen to you.
Absolutely.
That is, and people would call you a paranoid nut for that.
Not at all. Listen to me. The thing is this. I'm a person that believes in being proactive. I believe in building a bridge before 5 people get run over by a train. You have to think way far ahead. Think of it as a game of chess. I laid out every imaginable possibility in this game of family chess. And I knew what I was up against. And I'll tell you something. It was the most complex, difficult game that I've ever played because everything was working against me. And in fact, my business associates, everybody that I knew thought I was off my rocker to think that I could succeed. But I thought differently because anybody that knows me well, I don't give up. I will not give up. And if I have a place to get to, I will get to it no matter what obstacle is in front of me. I will walk around it. I will crawl over it. I will go under it. I'll go through it. But there's nothing that is going to stop me when justice and the betterment of my fellow man, and especially my children, are at stake.
Well done. I agree. I think you're absolutely brilliant. And we just need more people like you who have a very high visibility, talking the way you talk, to give men who are going through all this some hope. Because I am so frightened of the figures for suicide for so many men. And again, that's something else that goes unnoticed. Nobody seems to care.
Nobody. 3,000 men commit suicide in Canada every single year.
That's
more. It's more than the number of people that died in the 9/11 tragedy.
That's probably more people than die on your roads in car accidents. Probably. I would be willing to bet.
Yeah, that I'm not sure. But the thing is this.
It's still a 9/11 a year. Yep.
Men are suffering. Men are dying. And quite honestly, for me, the real barometer of how bad it is for men and women is the number of suicides that take place, because the person that commits suicide, they see no other viable option in life but death.
Yeah, and of course you have to remember too, those children who are deprived of their fathers, both the girls and the boys, and the terrible damage that actually does to the society, because once the father isn't there, and yes, there are feckless fathers, as there are feckless mothers, but the fact is the majority of men do want to be united with their children. They do not want to be... Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Erin. Yeah, yes, not only do they want to be with their children, but we need to be saying loudly and as often as possible, those children need them. You look at, people will call this right-wing, conservative, religious, whatever, bollocks to all of it. It's a fact. You look at the fate of children without fathers, real fathers in their homes, and the figures are disastrous in terms of drug addiction, dropping out of school, getting involved with gangs, teen pregnancies, getting involved in the criminal justice system, dropping out of school. It goes on and on and on. The result of having no father is devastating to children. And intentionally keeping a father out of a good father, a father who, or even just a mediocre father, even intentionally keeping a mediocre father out of a child's life is child abuse and is endangering your children. And more mothers need to hear it, and more of society needs to hear it.
I fully agree, Dean. It is my view that a child is deserving of a loving mother, of a loving father, in a loving home. And it seems to me that feminism, by virtue of their ideology to attack what they call the patriarchy, is there to destroy the traditional family unit, which they want the children to go with the mother. And we end up with this condition that you spoke about, Dean, where children are growing up, boys and girls. They are bitter. They are angry. Yes, some will manage, but many are lashing out and saying, you know what, this really hurt.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If they don't wind up dead. I mean, they're more likely to commit suicide. They're more likely to die of a drug overdose. They're more likely to get involved in gang activity. I'm repeating myself again. But this isn't funny, and this isn't, I don't know. Someone will say, oh, well, you're speaking from some kind of traditional religious values. Well, I don't know how religious you are, Attila, but what's that got to do with anything? This is what the scientific literature shows overwhelmingly. So it doesn't matter whether you're coming from this as an atheist, an agnostic, some sort of Christian, Jew, Muslim, Hindu. It doesn't matter. Fathers matter. It's a biological reality. And
look at Steve. The reality is this: a nation that is comprised of strong families, intact, strong families, is a strong nation. Our families are broken, and consequently, our nations, our societies, are left in absolute tatters.
You know what, even if there's going to be divorce, and I think you would agree with this too, the ideal is if you can't avoid the divorce, if you can't get along, then judges and the courts and everybody else should be saying, great, you need to be doing everything in your power to make sure both those kids have regular daily contact with both parents and that both parents are actively involved, even if they hate each other on everything else. If they can get along on this. Hell, Erin, did you have that with your first husband, Jack? Didn't you divorce?
Yes, he had a house for 2 years.
After a divorce?
Yeah, he lived in the basement flat, and I lived upstairs with the children. So the children could, and I think you have to get used to the idea that majority of couples do actually put their children first. And however bitter they feel about each other, they're mature enough. We're dealing often in a very uneven situation where one of the couple has some sort of personality disorder, and that's where it goes very, very badly wrong, because the law can only deal with people who are willing to obey the law. But when you deal with antisocial people, with different kinds of they have no recognition of the law. They will lie, cheat, under oath, under any circumstances, and the law isn't set up to deal with that, let alone all the political implications of the radical feminists, many of whom are seriously personality disordered. I know a lot of them.
Well, yes, and so, of course, just defeating feminism alone is not the answer to everything, but they're certainly one of the blockades for us searching for solutions, aren't they?
Absolutely. And the most important thing is to actually expose the fraudulent claims of the feminist movement that it is all men, it is the patriarchy that oppressed women over the centuries. And you see it across the Western world, and unfortunately, a lot of the radical feminism, because they see themselves as a global force, are moving into other countries. And it is a recipe for disaster.
Let me speak to that, Erin.
Yes.
A few years ago, I was invited to go to a Children's Aid Society domestic violence symposium. They had 600 people in attendance. The majority, almost all of them, were children's aid executives, women's shelter industry executives, and some medical and lawyers and so forth. I listened to what they were talking about, and I was absolutely appalled as to what they were saying. They were depicting by pictures that children have drawn where a father is shooting the mother and his blood splattering everywhere. They were talking, and this was the keynote speaker, I can't think of the doctor's name, a psychiatrist. They were so badly exaggerating and falsely portraying men as these violent people that I came very close to standing up and just shouting out loud as to how wrong it was, but instead I videotaped and I audio taped this particular event. That day I made a decision that I would host a domestic violence symposium in Toronto.
Brilliant.
That would bring forward the absolute truth. I've spoken with...
okay, hold on. Let me make you hold on. We're going to take a brief break to run to the bathroom and listen to a little music. Then I want to hear the rest of your story, and then we're going to start running to close out the show. Is that all right, guys?
Yeah.
That'll be fine.
Okay. James, can we have a music break?
Join ABFM Radio Director James Huff and ABFM News Director Robert O'Hara every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Central for A Voice for Men News and Activism. This is the weekly radio show that brings you news from the front lines of the men's rights movement, along with interesting and important guests. Come and get your weekly dose of news and commentary about what's going on with the state of men and boys all over the world and what's being done about it. Listen every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Central Time. The time for waiting on the sidelines is over. The time to act is now.
All right, thanks for that music break, and good ad for one of our other shows. New ABFM News and Activism is on Tuesday night. You guys also want to check out Honey Badger Radio, which is on most Thursday nights. I believe it's coming up this Thursday as well. Anyway, we're back from our break with Attila. Attila, you were just telling us about your effort to set up a domestic violence symposium up there in Toronto?
Yes, that's correct. Over the years, I've come to understand what domestic violence really is. I have found Professor Martin Fierbert to be the authority on matters concerning domestic violence, and I've actually spoken with him. He has agreed to be a keynote speaker. Although we were scheduled to have the symposium this year, due to my own personal matters, such as the arrest of my son, I had to postpone this event, and it is scheduled to be tentatively held in Toronto in May of 2014. I will be assembling an array of very, very prominent, intelligent, and well-informed, unabated medical people to speak about matters concerning domestic violence in its honest and factual state.
I'll tell you, I can't make promises for her, but I would bet that Erin would be willing to make a Skype appearance for your group.
Sure, yeah, I'd like to do that.
But anyway,
that would be fantastic. And in fact, Erin, I had you on the list, and Professor Fierbert told me that if he was coming, that you would come too. But I also am very understanding that you have recently had a stroke, and mobility for you is perhaps not as good as it was.
Not the problem. It's just the traveling expense, because I can't any longer sit for any length of time in a seat. I have to be able to lie down, and of course that's expensive because it means it's in business class. That's the reason why I essentially say I'm quite happy to do Skype for you.
Well, that'll be fine. So that is an event that is scheduled a little bit further out. I think it's very important that we speak about matters concerning domestic violence in its honest and real state. Unfortunately, I call it the domestic violence industry is geared towards money. It's a business. Yeah. And if the industry cannot demonstrate, if they cannot demonstrate that there's a crisis, although it's a completely fallacious crisis, then they get no funding. So it's a money issue. It's not a domestic violence issue. And I agree with you, Erin, as you said earlier, domestic violence is not a woman's issue. It's not a men's issue. It's a family issue.
Yes, exactly.
And the saddest part to me of all is if there was not so much ideology attached to it, there are still people who could make careers out of helping people in domestic violence, merely doing it properly. But I guess that's just not the easy way to make money, isn't it? The easy way is to demonize men rather than look at women like adults and men like potentially vulnerable human beings themselves.
Dean, if you want funding, you have to present women as victims, because that was one of my problems from the beginning. I was saying, hey, hang on a minute, there are women in this refuge of mine that actually are as violent or more violent. Nobody wanted to hear that. Everybody tried to stop me, even publishing Prone to Violence. I had to have a police escort, because the women's movement knew that if there was any idea that women could be equally as violent as men, that would threaten their funding.
And we have got to shatter that wall of silence that these people have created. It's time to stand up and shout it to the rooftops and be angry and let the anger be heard, because this is wrong on so many levels. And it's not just damaging men, it's damaging women, it's damaging children. It's damaging, period. Now, I'm going to mention again, Rally, Queen's Park, Toronto, next Saturday at this time. We're going to try to arrange a live call-in to this show for that event. That's 50-50. We'll see if it happens. The day before that, Professor Miles Groth will be giving his speech on boys and the need for centers to help young men in our nation, in Canada and the United States, really most of the world, but certainly in Canada. I mean, we're getting to the point where about 35% of college graduates are going to be male soon, and that's absurd, and people will even actually call that equality. Now, there's been a recent effort even to shut down Professor Miles Groth's speech, hasn't there, Attila?
Yes, it has. I was absolutely shocked when I got a message that the University of Toronto is seeking about $1,000 in some security expense or security deposit in order for the event on the 27th to go on with Professor Groth. And I looked at this and I thought, this is ridiculous. First of all, our event is an absolute peaceful one and requiring minimal security. It is those people who want to see this men's voices and activities such as assembling a men's group. They just want to see this annihilated, destroyed. And in my view, this $1,000 is specifically geared towards impeding or stopping the event. It is not there for any other reason, in my view. And sadly, while we are struggling to gather this money and pay them, there are ways to deal with this. And I can assure you that down the road, we will be looking at taking legal action to stop this kind of tyranny and this kind of absolutely inexcusable means to impede the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms that guarantees us freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, and I find this $1,000 to be an impediment for that event.
Although I'm quite certain a lot of our audience knows, I'm going to repeat for those who have no doubt. 1 year ago, at this same location, at the same University of Toronto, Warren Farrell, one of the most peaceable, gentle, nice men you will ever encounter in your entire life. In fact, if anybody ever had a real complaint about him, it is he's almost that he's too nice, got viciously protested, and people trying to get into his event were attacked by organized feminists and by organized, I'm just going to call them thugs, just for trying to hear him come and speak about the issues that boys were facing. Since then, you'd had Catherine Young come in to talk, a professor, to talk about what she sees as a former feminist as the excesses of feminism. That got protested. That got threats. That got fire alarms pulled. Doctors Nathanson and Young a few months later came and gave another speech. There were people banging, screaming, pulling fire alarms, trying to intimidate, wearing masks. Every time somebody has tried to speak on these issues, there have been violence and threats of violence and illegal activities. And now that Professor Groth is speaking, we expect the same, and the university wants to charge CAFE, the group putting on these peaceful speeches saying rather unremarkable and non-hateful things. They want them to pay for security for the violence that keeps being brought by the gender ideologues to stop the speech from happening. And it is grossly outrageous.
What is astounding to me is that there are so many women's groups and what have you at the university. They are fully funded. This organization, this group of men who want to form a men's group has no funding, none. And they are hit. They are hit with an impediment such as this, effectively extinguishing their financial ability to exist. This is appalling to me.
Well, the good news there is that A Voice for Men and other people have actually helped them raise that money just so the event can go on. But I don't think that's good enough, because I think that if they get their protection money, their extortion money, They're just going to come back and ratchet up and ask for still more next time.
But the extraordinary thing, Dean, is that as you look at it very rationally, the university is allowing its people to behave violently and asking for the people who are the victims to pay for it.
Exactly. And that to me is asinine. It makes, I am going to be arguing, and I will fight fervently to make sure that the university refunds that money.
Yes.
Unless the group that is going to be assembling at the event are the people that create the problem. Then I can understand that we should cover that cost.
The university should absolutely be facing legal repercussions for this. On the line here, I have James Huff, who would like to say something or ask a question.
Yes, I have a couple things to say. One of the things that I want to put forward is the fact that with the University of Toronto administration charging this fee as protection money, so to speak, this is only going to embolden the feminists to cause an even greater racket than before. And the reason being is because they know that if they do it again, that those fees will continue to be levied and probably more of them as a result. So if they can't drive people interested in men's rights off their campus via reasoning, then what they're going to do is they're going to drive them off through financial means. And by continually making these threats, the U of T administration will continue to ratchet up the charges. Another thing I also
astounding about these, I'm just interrupt too. What's astounding about these thugs is not only are they trying to shut down an open public event that can be taped and that anybody can come to, they're holding their own private events that no one's allowed into without an invitation, and nobody's allowed to tape, and nobody's allowed to know what goes on there. They're going to be having secret meetings to do more to try to shut down organizations like CAFE in secret, like a bunch of cowardly, fascist thugs. Go on, James.
Another thing I want to mention is we know that the conference starts at 7 p.m. Eastern Time next Friday. I will be on the air promptly at 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time with Valsen, Lucien, and we'll put out a couple news stories, but we will be waiting patiently for calls from activists on the ground, and only activists on the ground, to give us their first impressions of the pre-show, so to speak. And we will be running, this is a 3-hour special. We will also be running a 3-hour special on Saturday, coinciding with the start of the rally. And we will be taking calls. That's what we're going to do.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. What I wanted to say to you is I'm working on creating a way for us to actually stream a live video feed from the event to the internet that you can tap into. So that'll be in real time.
And in addition, we're going to do everything we can to get a phone hookup going so that we can be live on the air talking. We know that every single time there's been a massive protest starting an hour or so before somebody comes to speak, and always the same. The cowardly thugs who try to shut the event down usually evaporate, a good half hour after the talk begins, and of course, rarely bother to come and listen to the event or what's being said. If they did, they'd know there's nothing objectionable going on there. But yes, James, I'm so glad you were able to set that up. I wish I could be there. I know I'm going to do everything I can to help you coordinate things here and coordinate with Attila and his people there. This is big, guys, and if anybody listening has the ability to get to Toronto on the evening of the 27th or the morning of the 28th in Queen's Park nearby, be there, get there. This looks to be the event of the year in North America when it comes to speaking out fearlessly and boldly about the crisis for men and boys in America. And, in Canada, and America, and the United Kingdom, and Australia, and Europe, and Africa and India. Practically everywhere in the world, this crisis has been growing, what we call the so-called developed world. Civil rights are being trashed. It's got to end. Attila, did you have any final closing thoughts or information for us?
Yes, I do. Number one, men need to understand to never give up. Number two, in Canada, tape record everything secretly. It's legally permissible to do so. That gives you the evidence that you will need to exonerate yourself in family and criminal court, especially.
Always be recording.
Always. On the 27th, Support Cafe, listen to Professor Miles Gross speak. It's an invaluable piece that we need to attend. The following day on Saturday, you need to be at Queen's Park at 11 a.m. This will be a monumental event. Permits are being put in place right now. There will be a 3-hour event in front of Queen's Park. The media will be present. Some of the most key advocates that have been doing this for decades are going to be there. But we need you, the person that has been wronged, the person who has children that you cannot see, the person who has had problems at schools, in family court, in the legal system, in criminal court. You need to come out, because what we need to show the world is that men are no longer going to put up with this nonsense. We are not going to allow to be abused anymore.
And you women who love your women. Go ahead. Sorry, Attila.
Yeah. Men and boys are in crisis, and if anybody can accept this to be okay, we have got a bigger issue than I had anticipated.
And you women out there who care about the men and boys in your lives, we need you there too. How about you? How about you, Erin? You got anything to say?
No, I wish you all well, and I shall be praying for you, because I believe utterly and passionately in the family and the rights of children to both their parents.
Hopefully you'll be on the air, too, next Saturday listening in. Hopefully we'll be able to get that patched in.
Okay.
Attila Vinczer, I am so glad and proud to know a man like you. I am so looking forward to hearing about and watching from afar the events there in Toronto. I guess that'll wrap our show tonight. Everybody remember, there is no shame to be had in standing up for yourself and your fellow men and for the boys and men in your life. James, if you could take us home.
You have been listening to Revelations with Erin Pizzey and her co-host, Dean Esme. Our show's opening music is called Eternal Hope, and the closing piece is called Sunshine. Both pieces are by Kevin MacLeod and are used under the Creative Commons Attribution License, with a link in the show notes. We also wish to thank James Huff and Paul Elam, and indeed all those who are part of the A Voice for Men community, for their support for this show. Remember, in truth there is hope and healing, and we hope that you will be part of helping to spread the truth and the healing. Please join us next time in Revelations with Erin Pizzey.
my ex-wife